Już? Yeah. Okay, hello everyone. We should start our evening session. And let's welcome our next panelist, Jana Obročnikova from the Hradec Králové University. And Jana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Carolina. So my name is Jana Obročnikova. I'm above all a craftsman, a second-generation craftsman. I took over my parents' business in leatherworking 10 years ago. And several years ago, I started to study archaeology because it's a fascinating subject. And I make many reconstruction of the archaeological leather accessories and shoes. And I wanted to see them in person and study them in person, and I wanted to talk about it from our scientific point of view. So I prepared some samples for you, which if you will be bored through my presentation, you can look at. So here are two pouches which you can look at, and on the other end there are also two of them. The ones who are watching online won't be won't be able to look at those in person, but I have pictures in the presentation, so it should be also sufficient. My topic is about leather pouches. The leather pouch is not very common find in archaeological context. Mostly they are shoes, and for every several hundreds of shoes, there's one or two pouches. So in the archaeological literature, they're often described only as a rectangular piece of leather sewn on the sides, and that's all. And then there are drawings which could be understandable, but sometimes they hide some details which are important for reconstruction. Also, as being a craftsman, I'm a part of a reenactment group, reenacting the second half of 14th century in Czech. And many of my friends asked me, like, Jana, you know something about leather, you make stuff out of leather, so tell us, what should we wear? What should we use as leather accessories? And what's time appropriate for our time period? Well, for 15 years now, I'm trying to answer these questions. Well, my dissertation will be about leather accessories, but I'm still not sure what's correct. So we will see in 4 years if I will come up with some typology or something which will actually answer this question after this long time. So the first answers, I tried to find the first answers in the great book by Olaf Gaubitz, Purses in Pieces, which is a really crucial piece of work published shortly after Olaf died. So on the 130 pages, he told us how the accessories looked like, what kinds there were, what construction approaches you can take, but there's not much about the chronology, and the technological descriptions are sometimes not as thorough as they could be. Olaf Gaubitz also gave us in 1984 a universal language for researchers of archaeological leather with the article, The Drawing and Registration of Archaeological Footwear, Studies in Conservation 29. And this is something that most of us is familiar with. The registration is based on the technological details that are very well researched, also thanks to him and other researchers, on archaeological footwear. And it works very well because you describe the seam, you draw it in a certain way, and everyone knows what you mean because it repeats on the footwear. It doesn't repeat on it does repeat on leather accessories, but these things tend to be a little bit more complicated. Olaf actually gives us a solution to this. He says that if you don't understand this correctly, or if it's not possible to draw in his simplified way of drawing the shoes, you should add a little cross-section on the margins of the drawing, and it helps others to understand the construction properly, and you can easily show your colleagues what you found and discuss the details more easy. So I did first reconstruction in soft leather material and textile because it was COVID, and I tried to see how the pouches were made. I did some stuff that's in purses and pieces, but then I added other literature from other places, and this was the start. But then over the last 5 years, I did over 50 proper reconstructions of archaeological of the leather pouches from high medieval times. These are examples of the main issues I had, following only the literature. Because the repeated details on the archaeological pouches from 13th to 15th century are that there's rows of stitching on the top edge of the pouch, and also that there's not only the side seams on the sides of the pouch, but there's also additional rows of stitching, which most of the authors describe both these details as decorative, but they don't describe how the seams has been made, even though that the traces are usually visible on leather, because leather is like your annoying neighbor. It remembers everything you did to him, and it will show you many, many years after the deed is done. So in Purses and Pieces, there's a suggestion based on reconstruction from Lübeck, where these holes are filled with leather string, which is something that's interesting, but I didn't reconstruct it as many times. We are circulating one of the reconstructions with the leather seam, but this presentation is mostly about sewing with threads. So first, the top edge. Some authors suggest whip stitching. The whip stitching leaves a quite recognizable trace with these small bells. And when you sew the top edge of the pouch with a whip stitch on a single layer of leather, it looks quite nice. I can't say that it doesn't, but it doesn't help anything. The top edge still stretches, and it also makes the edge a little bit more fragile and more prone to stretching. So it's decorative, but it serves nothing else. Another approach to this was offered by Frances Pritchard on the finds from London. She suggests that you can actually, instead of the whip stitching, you can use the tablet woven edge, which was used also on the contemporary high medieval clothing. I tried this. This is the reconstruction of the pouch she presented. It's really small. It's like 6 centimeters height. And the tablet woven edge is made on one continuous weft, which is divided in the middle. I don't know if this is really how it was done, but it was fun to try. And the tablet woven edge actually does prevent stretching of the opening of the pouch, and it looks really nice, so I was quite happy with this approach. Another interesting artifact is a pouch from Nachlass des Hermanns von Gogh. This guy was really cool guy from the 14th century city of Cologne. If you wanna if you like tabloid stories, read up on him. He's really fun. And his belongings, after the Kölnisch burgher executed him at the end of 14th century, his personal stuff was left in the Rathaus, or the city, or in the town hall, thank you. In the town hall of Cologne up to this day, and now they exhibit it in the city museum. I studied this artifact only through online catalog and printed catalog of the museum, but it seems from the photos that here they actually really used the tablet woven edge. here I used too many tablets, so it seems, and too thick thread, but if you use only lesser amount, it looks more like as what's in the original pictures. This pouch also has a textile covers on the sides, which cover the main seam of the pouch, which would cause additional rows of stitching on the sides of the pouch. So that's why this was also important part of the research. To sum up the solutions of the opening of the pouch. You can do the whip stitching, you can do it alone, but it doesn't help anything. If you add a second layer to the whip stitched edge, it does prevent stitching. It still leaves the edge deformed, and it actually serves a purpose, so I'm inclined to this solution based only on the reconstruction. Then you can make a separate tablet woven edge, which does prevent stretching. It looks nice, it's a fancy detail. Or you can use the tablet woven edge to add another layer to the pouch, which is also kind of interesting way how to look at this. The pattern of the stitches changes if you go through the weft, one time through the weft and one time through the leather. That's very, very condensed and very tiny stitching next to each other. It's very close to each other, so that's possible. If you want to go odd times through the weft and once through the leather, it will be a little irregular, but it also makes quite characteristical imprints on the leather. And of course you can do combinations. And important thing is that underneath the tablet woven edge, the top edge of the pouch actually stays undeformed. So you prevent the deformation through the making of the pouch, and it still is straight, not deformed like with whip stitching. Another key part of my research was when they told me that I could actually visit the archaeological collections. So thanks to Deborah Palman, I was able to visit Dordrecht's museum and revisit the stuff that was published in Purses and Pieces and examine these pouches and girdle purses, which I did for my diploma thesis myself, and look at the technological detail in person, which was kind of groundbreaking for me, and it helped a lot in the research. So this pouch was published in Purses and Pieces. This drawing is by Olaf. It has the cross-section on the margins, which suggests that the margins were folded inwards and the stitching was made through 4 layers of leather. And so this is my drawing, where the details are maybe more legible because it's made on A3 and it's not copied from the publication where the picture is 3 centimeters high, which is a pity for such amount of detail. So the top edge is made by whip stitching. Thanks to Marquita Volken's remark when we were looking at this together, and she said, well, I thought, okay, there might be another layer. Maybe it had a lining, you know, because the flesh side is inside, and that's rough, and, well, it's nicer to have lined pouch. But she was like, that would be interesting, but the imprints of the threads are actually on the flesh side, here, and not on the grain side. So the pouch was actually a lining to a textile item, and you would never see the leather parts because it was covered. And you can tell these apart by looking at the imprints of the threads. If you draw this pouch in the simplified version of the registrating the archaeological leather, it doesn't tell you anything. Most of the pouches in articles look like this. They have the double row of stitching, they have some stitching on the side, and they might have some openings on the top edge. But if you add actually the cross sections, it should be much more understandable for your colleagues to compare what they actually found and what's possible from the technological point of view. So this is the detail of the side seam, the double side seam. And as I was curious how it works, I made a reconstruction of this. The flash side out, whip stitched on both sides, then turned the grain side with textile cover outwards, then stitched together on the side, and here's a finished product. I wore it in with my reenactor costume for a year, and then I was too curious, so I ripped it apart and to see how it really looks. Well, I don't think now that the textile was attached to the same seam on the side as the leather. Because when you rip it apart and you look at the details here, the textile actually imprinted in between those layers, and that's something that's not visible on the Dordrecht pouch. And also, the imprints of the thread from the outside of the leather are less pronounced when you do it over the textile. If you compare it to the original piece, the deformation is much higher, even though I used the same quality of I also used goat leather, a veg tanned in the same thickness, so it should be more similar than it is here. So, but there was additional layer of textile which was sewn to the outside of the pouch, and we can prove it by looking at the imprints on the top of the pouch. This is a copycat of the first one. It's an apprentice pouch, I think, because the double seam is visible only on the, it's also from Dordrecht, and the double seam is only on the left bottom part of the pouch. And the rest of the pouch is stitched from the outside using whip stitching. And another big difference is that there are flash edge holes on the opening of the pouch and no imprints of the thread at all. So this pouch was actually a pouch and had a textile lining which didn't survive in archaeological context. There's a third pouch from Dordrecht, which is also published by Olaf. And this is even more complicated than the first and the second, because there is the double seam, like on the first two pieces, like that. But then there's additional marks which are not very much visible even when you have it in your hand. It looks almost like scratches, but they are grain to grain whip stitching, which is sometimes only scratches and sometimes it's real stitches. So there the attachment of the additional layer was actually made using a cover strip and over textile. So this pouch was covered in textile, and then the side seams were covered by a covering strip, probably out of textile in this case. In literature, you can find in historical collections this analogies to this. This is a pouch from Switzerland, and it has the tablet woven bands on the sides, which is sewn to the sides of the pouch. And in these collections, there are actually pouches that are lined with leather. It's white leather, it's not veg tan, but there are textile pouches, ornate pouches, really embroidered, heavily embroidered pouches, which have leather linings, but we don't talk about them because they're not that common. So here's a reconstruction, not using the textile layers, but only the side cover strips as an option which is possible, but not proved in any way. And another version of this is a leather covering strip on the side of the pouch. This pouch was published many years ago in 1998 from Greifswald, it actually has a leather covering strap in situ. The authors don't mention which way it was sewn to the pouch, but it was sewn to the pouch. And it again makes the additional double seam next to the main seam of the pouch. And the other drawing, which is kind of messy, I apologize for that. I had an hour in Elbląg to figure it out, draw it, and leave for my bus. But I will come back there. They should be a little bit afraid because they will have to kick me out, screaming. So this pouch actually confused me in literature. It's published by Rybarczyk in Akcesoria strojů ve středověčním Elblągu. Something like that. And it has actually 3 additional rows of stitching, which was really confusing to me because if it's an odd number of additional rows, it doesn't confirm with the previously shown examples. So I didn't think about it much, but then I got it in my hands. And if you look very closely and you use your magnifying glass from the flesh side of this seam, you can see that it is, again, the same type of covering strip, but made in a different way. There's 1 row of whip stitching that holds the whole pouch together. Then you add the covering strip, here probably made of leather. Then you whip stitch it to the side of the pouch, and then you make 2 sets of holes, and you do a cross stitch there. There are actually traces of the cross stitching on both on the flesh side and the grain side of the pouch. So, and the whip stitching, you say there should be 4 rows, but the whip stitch actually goes from the tiny, tiny holes into the bigger ones, which were probably pre-made. So the second row, the middle row here, was used twice. I don't know if that's understandable. Okay. So there is a confusion, but if you look at the imprints and the tiny, tiny traces, it's possible to see that. This is a drawing of the cross-stitching that was used on high medieval girdle purses. From my diploma thesis, there are 2 versions of that. If you want to explore this technique, you're welcome to look at it. So, to sum it up for the side seams. Well, the pouches, mostly the square pouches, are presented as simple objects that are sewn on the sides, and not much more is said about them. And they seem to be chronological, not as sensitive as other accessories. If you look closely at these details, it's maybe more chronological sensitive than it appears, so they should be treated with more attention, maybe. On the left, on the table, you can see few versions of what's out there. There will be more. There will be the side seams made with the leather tongue. There will be more decorative stitching. So this is what I've seen and what I think is interesting. And if you look at other materials, it will be interesting to compare notes on the actual findings. If you look at this last column, there are only 2 variants of the stitching when you draw it flat. But if you compare it to the 3D or to the cross sections, you can see the difference, and it's 6 very unique ways of doing this detail. So the cross section is really crucial. So, well, Olaf knew it, and he told us, in 1984, that if we want to communicate the archaeological letter better, we should use the cross sections and very close descriptions of the technology that was used that we can see. But if you draw it or make photos, because archaeological leather is so photogenic, you can see all the details when you present them, it's not enough. So I'm looking forward for more cross sections of these details in literature. And I hope to expand the typology and this subject in my dissertation. So I thank you for your attention, and that's all from me.
Okay, Jana, thank you very much for this very insightful and fresh view of this topic. And I'd like to invite Wojciech Kawka from the museum in Bytom to show us his research on modern leather artifacts. So the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. Dear listeners, dear colleagues, I'm happy to participate for the second time at the GREMIO in PRAXI conference. My sincere thanks to Anna Kowalska for the invitation and letting me include the Upper Silesian finds into the wider stream of footwear, of leather archaeology in Poland. Last time I spoke about medieval Wodzisław Śląski and what leatherworking looked like in that city during the first decades after its founding. Today, however, I would like to highlight the transition from medieval to early modern shoemaking, thanks to the recent discoveries from another Silesian town. So, historic Silesia is a region located in the southwestern part of present-day Poland. However, it was incorporated into Kingdom of Bohemia and Habsburg's empire for much of its past. This region is traditionally divided into two parts. Lower Silesia to the west, that is thought to be wealthier in the Middle Ages, and the Upper Silesia to the east, that was less rich because of the soils mainly, and smaller towns were present there. And in the southeastern part of Upper Silesia lies the subject of this presentation, the city of Żory. The earliest mention of Żory dates back to 1272, when Władysław I, Duke of Opole and Racibórz, took over a large village from his knight Chwalisz to turn the village into a new town. The establishing process, however, took quite a while, and Żory didn't appear in historical records as a developed town until 3 decades later. Unfortunately, we don't have any information about leather workers in Żory until the late 15th century. However, there's no doubt that these craftsmen operated in the city, as evidenced by examples from other towns. For example, the founding document of Forbrzeg specified the prince's income from the stalls of bakers, butchers, and shoemakers. This shows that in the Middle Ages, footwear was considered a basic necessity on a par with food. Therefore, we can assume that the shoe trade in Żory was also organized at the time of the city's founding. We do know, however, that a shoemakers guild was established in Żory in 1495. In 1567, Emperor Maximilian II confirmed the statute of this corporation of craftsmen. The document contained various regulations regarding the procurement of leather for production, the sale of finished products, the hiring and training of apprentices, and the law and order within the guild. It also prohibited the activities of craftsmen who were not included to the guild, so the guild could maintain the monopoly. Luckily, this document survived to the beginning of 20th century, and I will refer to it several times throughout the presentation. Furthermore, we learn that Żory had 32 masters, shoemakers with their own workshops at the time. The highest number I know in Upper Silesia. And this number seems quite significant, considering that the town had a population of around 1,300 at the time. This translates to approximately 41 customers per workshop. How does this compare to other cities? In the much larger city of Bytom, there were 80 customers per master, while in Gliwice there were 56. In the small town of Toszek, however, there were as many as 26 shoemakers, with a population of only 749 inhabitants. Both Żory and Toszek, both Żory and Toszek were surrounded by a very dense network of rural settlements, which stabilized already in the 13th century. And peasants coming to the town for fairs were the main source of income for shoemakers. This also indirectly demonstrates the significant importance of the leather industry in Żory during the Middle Ages. It's no surprise then that shoemakers in Żory had to look after their own interests. Therefore, the guild statutes contained numerous prohibitions against leather tanning and shoemaking by craftsmen outside the guild, not incorporated, within a 1-mile radius of the city. That's because during the 16th century, a large portion of the Silesian peasants became impoverished and were unable to purchase shoes produced in the city. Consequently, numerous bunglers, cobblers, and other craftsmen appeared, sewing cheaper but inferior products comparing to the guild products. And they threatened the guild's business. We don't know whether the ban on their activities issued by the emperor himself was effective. We also know the appearance of the guild seal in Żory. The seal was made in 1589. In its center is a heraldic shield depicting 3 very high shoes arranged in a triskelion, surrounded by the 2 stars, a leather knife, and an owl at the bottom. Around it runs a quite crudely written and misspelled inscription reading "Seal of the leather workers of the city of Żory." The motif of 3 shoes or legs forming a star is quite interesting and distinctive. In Upper Silesia, it also appears on the seals of shoemakers from Bytom, Opole, and Cieszyn from the 16th to 17th century. However, it is more common in Bohemia and Moravia. For example, it was the symbol of the Shoemakers Guild in Nowe Mesto, today part of present-day Prague. This motif appears also on the seal of the guild from Náchod as early as the 15th century and remained in use in various places, in various towns, until modern times. It is therefore possible that this symbol was brought to Silesia from the Czech Republic. Maybe. Okay, now for the archaeology. Until recently, our knowledge of the past shoemakers of Żory could only be based on the written sources I presented. But this changed in 2022. Archaeological research was conducted during the construction of the new fountain, located in the northeastern corner of the market square. During the excavations, several archaeological objects, a cultural layer with a maximum thickness of just 30 centimeters lying directly on the clay, and masonry relics were discovered. Subsequent geophysics survey suggests that the exposed walls originated from a modern town hall. A wealth of historical material was recovered from the damp cultural layer, including the leather artifacts of our interest. And this formed a distinct cluster in the western part of the digging site. A total of over 1,800 leather fragments were recovered, which were divided into 5 basic categories during my analysis. Fragments of shoe soles and uppers were the most numerous. The secondary offcuts could also have originated primarily from footwear, as suggested by the seams and stitchings. Only 6 small fragments were considered primary offcuts, originating from the first cutting of freshly tanned leather. 15 other artifacts were also identified, fragments of clothing, belts, and patches. For all fragments, attempts were made to determine the species of animal from which the leather came. This was determined based on the appearance of the leather grain and the shape and arrangement of the hair follicles. Unfortunately for me, this requires the grain to be preserved in good conditions, so the task was successful only in half of the cases. There is a noticeable predominance of hides from adult and young cattle, a small proportion of goat hide, and a single upper made of pigskin. It was clearly visible that thick, stiff cattle hide was primarily used for sole components, while softer calf and goat hides were often used for upper components. The predominance of cattle hides has been clearly visible in shoemaking since the late Middle Ages. The statutes of the Shoemakers Guild clearly show that the shoemakers in Żory purchased and tanned hides on their own, from which they then sewed new shoes. This was governed by special rules dictated by fairness to other members of the guild. The shoemakers secured access not only to hides, but also to other materials needed for tanning: oak bark, tallow, and fat or grease. Animal fats were essential for finishing, protecting, and moisturizing the leather after the tanning was finished. As early as the beginning of 14th century, Pietro de Crescenzi wrote that pig fat is good for greasing the shoes. And Władysław Raymond vividly presented this in the 4th part of Chłopi. When the village prepares for the funeral of the deceased Boryna, Jan Brosz ordered Witek to smear Boryna's boots with fat because they were so dry that it was impossible to put them on his feet. And a little further we read, Witek smeared the boots lazily, heating them up strongly by the fireplace. This resembles the pseudo-tanning process used by settlers, by the way. The quality of leather tanned by shoemakers from Żory can be assessed in part by its delamination, which is usually the result of errors made during the tanning process. Partial or complete delamination was found in approximately 13% of the analyzed fragments. Furthermore, cuts in the flesh and dehairing against the hair direction were observed in some places. This quality is not significantly different from that observed in Karolina Brusiewicz research on medieval leatherworking in small towns in Pomerania. However, it is evident that there wasn't any significant progress in leather processing over the 2 centuries, between 14th and 16th centuries. Let us therefore move on to the presentation of the artifacts. Individual items characteristic of late medieval shoemaking have been identified in the collection. Among them were the sole and upper of a low-turn shoe, possibly laced at the instep. The shoe was originally approximately 14 centimeters long, making it suitable for a child aged 1.5 to 2 years. The child likely learned to walk in these shoes. In addition, two other sorts of child turn shoes with an elongated Gothic shape were identified, as well as a fragment of the upper of a boot fastened with toggles. Nevertheless, the vast majority of the artifacts should be associated with early modern shoemaking. The primary distinguishing feature is the new methods of joining the sole and upper, which emerged in the 16th century. One sole from a turn shoe with a hidden seam, I didn't know how to translate it correctly, was identified in the collection, but the majority of the footwear examined was constructed using the stitched down method, referred to in Polish nomenclature as a sandal construction, thanks to the Rerutkiewicz and Erekwart. The edges of the upper were bent outwards and stitched together with the sole. The seam was therefore located on the outside of the shoe. This construction allowed for the sewing of shoes with multi-layered soles cut from much thicker and stiffer leather than in the case of turn shoes. This made the footwear more robust and comfortable. In the collection from Żory, the presence of single sole shoes and shoes with both outer sole and insole was confirmed. Also, based on the impressions on the leather, slightly visible here, the use of midsole edgings was also confirmed. Single fragments of soles were also observed with preserved iron rivets or large holes left by them. These come from so-called heavy footwear, whose soles were reinforced with nails. Much better preserved examples of this type of footwear were discovered in Warsaw and identified by Lydia Eberle. Modern soles from Żory took on a stockier shape, and their toes were either wide and blunt, creating a characteristic cow mouth, or naturally rounded. Intermediate forms were also observed. The soles retained a slight asymmetry, meaning they were intended specifically for the left or the right foot. The uppers were cut into separate pieces, the vamp and the quarters. Most of the vamps are shaped like an elongated D letter with a straight or slightly curved edge at the instep. The flesh of most fragments show tunnel stitching from additional reinforcing elements like toe puffs and other internal linings. Separately cut one-piece quarters were usually in the form of a low rectangle, less often a low trapezoid. The wall construction corresponds to the cutting pattern DD as identified by Marquita Volken. Based on this, we can conclude that the most popular type of footwear in Żory was in this collection, of course, was a low slip-on shoe with a wide front, a vamp extending deep into the instep, and the shallow quarters. These correspond to the Hertogenbosch style and the so-called slippers, or in Polish pantofle, distinguished in the Warsaw material. The best preserved example of this footwear is a small child's shoe composed of a sole, vamp, toe puff, and heel stiffener. Unfortunately, the quarters and insole were not found in the collection. It's possible that the sole was just single layered. This specimen was also approximately 15 centimeters long and belonged to a child aged 1.5 to 2 years, already learning to walk. An interesting find is a single fragment in the form of elongated strap detached from a larger leather element. It is possible that the strap is part of the quarters overlapping the instep, and that it comes from Saint Neots style footwear made in cutting pattern VQS, known in large numbers from the shipwreck of Mary Rose that sank in 1545. Additionally, two vamps with an arched edge of the instep that merges into wings, creating low sides, have been identified. These may possibly come from shallow footwear fastened to the foot with a strap, known as the Veve or Gore style and associated with Landsknechts. Next slide. The presence of triangular inserts, which were placed as a supplementary element on the sole, where the vamp meets the quarters, was intriguing for me. They are unlikely to have originated from low-cut footwear, whose two-piece design usually eliminated the need for inserts. They may have originated from high boots with full shanks. Their very large components were difficult to cut in one piece from a piece of leather. Also, neither ornament of footwear nor mules were identified in the collections, so we have only simple everyday footwear of the inhabitants of Żory. It should be noted here that early modern shoemaking is characterized by a significant increase in the number of component parts, which were also found in the Żory collection. From this scheme, I have identified each of these elements at least once in the collection. This demonstrates the considerable complexity of footwear made in the city, but also the attention paid to its durability and comfort. Toe puffs and heel stiffeners were sewn even into briefly used children's shoes. The Żory shoemakers were committed to the high quality of their products. As the guild statute indicates, footwear sold in the city was subject to inspection, and any products that did not meet the requirements were confiscated and donated to the poor. Now, the question arises, to what activities should these finds be associated? Let's recall that only 6 primary offcuts were identified in the entire collection. The rest are fragments of used leather showing signs of wear, cutting, tearing of the material. All the artifacts are incomplete. Only 2 small children's shoes could be partially reconstructed. Further, all sole components show significant signs of wear resulting from intensive use. Almost no full-length soles are preserved. Traces of repairs by sewing patches are visible, and the clamps themselves have been identified in the collection. Next, traces of leather recycling are also noticeable. The cut edges of the uppers are very characteristic. Perhaps such vamp was reshaped and reused in a shoe of smaller size. Maybe. Many of the elements reinforcing the interior of the shoes, especially the depicted on the picture, heel stiffeners, toe puffs, even the insoles, bear traces of previous stitching. So they were recycled. All this points to the existence of a shoe cobbler or repairer in Żory. This craftsman repaired shoes on commission, most often by patching or completely replacing soles. That was easier thanks to the stitch down or sandal construction. He may also have collected or purchased old shoes to rework them or salvage leather from there, from which he made smaller shoe components and patches. Shoe repair was a very important branch of leatherworking in Silesia since the Middle Ages. We see specialized renovators in documents dating back to the early 14th century. So how should we determine the chronology of this collection? All the artifacts come from a single, relatively thin stratigraphic layer, which could have accumulated over a maximum of 30 years. We know from archaeological finds, but mainly from iconography and art, like depicted here, Peasants' Dance by Albrecht Dürer, that footwear constructed according to the late medieval principles and in the Gothic style was still worn in the first quarter of the 16th century. Adopting new Renaissance fashion trends and acquiring new shoemaking techniques was a time-consuming process. However, most of the artifacts were made according to the new principles, using almost exclusively the stitched down or sandal construction. The style of the modern footwear is similar to the specimens known mainly from Warsaw and the shipwreck of the Mary Rose, which sank in 1545. At the same time, no evidence of latchet shoes or the use of a welted construction was found, which became common in the second half of the 16th century. In summary, the collection of leather artifacts from the market square in Żory should be dated to the first half of the 16th century and viewed as waste from a shoe repairer's workshop. It is uncertain whether this workshop was located in the northeastern corner of the market square, where the concentration of the leather artifacts was located. It would have to be a simple stall with a light wooden structure above ground. Perhaps the craftsman simply dumped the offcuts here, and he had a workshop somewhere by the market square. Early modern footwear from Żory is characterized by good quality of workmanship. Shoemakers took care to ensure the durability and comfort of their products. The leather they tanned was also of satisfactory quality. We can see that footwear style changed at a similar pace to that observed throughout Europe, but the much greater importance of the stitched down, or in Polish, sandal construction, should be emphasized. Until now, it was believed that this construction method was used occasionally for children footwear or in the Alpine region. However, finds from Żory and from Warsaw show that at least in present-day Poland, this was the primary method of connecting the upper and sole of footwear for much of the 16th century before the welted construction. Okay, I do realize that this analysis was quite basic, but I hope you find it interesting and maybe inspiring, because at least in Poland we don't have many collections of 16th century footwear, except of Warsaw, Gdańsk, Szczecin, and Elbląg. However, this will be the first site from the south of the country. Thank you for your attention.
thank you, Wojciech, very much. It is very interesting because it's a rare example in Poland that we have the evidence of this transitional period from the high medieval to early modern period when the two types of shoes and two types of techniques coexisting. So it's really nice to hear your discovery, discovery. Yeah. So we've got plenty of time for discussion. So feel free to ask questions. I just wanted to say to Jana that congratulations. I noticed whip stitch on some pouches, and now you've made me to double check if there is internal or external lining on it. So that's really a fresh view. So now I can let someone else to say something. Bardzo proszę.
Very interesting presentation indeed, Dr. Kawka. I would like to ask a question pertaining to one of these first slides. This one on which you showed the numbers, okay? Number of inhabitants and number of, as you call it, incorporated masters or something like that?
Masters, yes.
Okay. What is, because the end result, that is number of clients per master, is exceedingly low. So my question is, what is the meaning of these numbers? For instance, on what kind of sources is based our knowledge that for instance, the town of Toszek had precisely 749 inhabitants? That is, how sure are these numbers? And the second question is, what does it mean, number of incorporated masters? Is it the number of masters who were really running their businesses, or is it the top number of masters regulated by law? Because this is not the same, doesn't have to be the same number. And if we think of number of potential clients per master, there could be significant differences, especially that in the light of this legal regulations you showed, that there were limits on operating, competing business within 1 mile distance from the town. But what's 1 mile? It means that there could be masters working outside of these limits, and this would further limit the number of potential customers coming from rural territory, all right? Because they could purchase their shoes from local cobblers or suitors or whomever. If you could say a few words about the meaning of this figures you showed on screen.
Okay, I can agree that these calculations are quite simple. But first, what is the source? We are lucky in the Upper Silesia that we have from the 16th century for almost each town. We have the so-called urbarium or urbash, where all the sources of income of the town's owner was listed. So thanks to this, we know, for example, number of houses in each town, and following that we can estimate how many people were living in this precise moment in the city. Also, the urbariums just like this guild statues, commonly inform how many masters of some craft were living in and working in the city, because each one of them also had to pay 2 times in the year a tax. So the number of the craftsmen are believable in this thanks to the source. What I wanted to show, or maybe to try to find using these calculations, was to find how did the market, how did the need for the shoes look like in each city, and how dependent were craftsmen on the peasants from the rural landscape, from the neighboring lands. Because it is quite, there are differences quite visible between each town. Normally, we would expect that if bigger the town, the more craftsmen it needs. However, this isn't the case in the upper Silesia. So only the external markets are viable answer for me. So in this case, all the villagers. Okay, and about the 1 mile, let's recall that 1 mile in the Middle Ages was around 6 to 7 kilometers. And this is the distance that, let's say, an average peasant could go to the town for a market, for a fair, make his business there, and return to his home during one day. So everything further than this 1 mile would be less threat for the craftsmen in the city. We can also see that mostly in the sources for modern era, 16th, 17th century, craftsmen like shoemakers, even not living in the city, not incorporated into the guild, were still trying to live on the suburbs and so on, because everyone was from the neighboring lands were going to that town, so they didn't need to find the clients in the landscape when the clients just come to the town. And there was a question about what was the number of masters. Yes, each master, following the regulations, only master master craftsman could have a stall or a workshop, and only he could sell the his products. So everyone above that number should be banned or were were working against the law. Of course, we need to remember that each master had at least one apprentice. So if there were 32 masters in Żory, there were around 60 shoemakers, but only 32 places where the shoes could be bought. I think that I answered all your questions.
Are there any more questions? Okay, Anna, please.
Maybe it's not a question, but remark. Jana, I'm really very angry because I have to check all the pouches I found till now. Your research is very extraordinary and make me like my infancy because I have to study again the material. And a few words to Wojciech. I'm not angry. But I'm grateful that you fulfill my needs so quickly because I told yesterday that we need such publications. I mean with photos, with drawings, with cross-sections and so on. And this period you told us about, I mean the bridge between middle age, late middle age and then nowadays, is absolutely incredible collection and extraordinary material to study. So thank you very much that you published it and go on, please.
Thank you very much.
We've got one more question.
Yes, I have a question to Jana. I was also very much impressed by both actually presentations, but the question is for Jana. Could you tell us please something more about the toolkit you used for your reproductions? Because I think this is also the very important evidence. And I'm particularly interested in needles. Are there any specific needles? So are these needles very different from like sewing needles? Can you say us something about that?
Well, at the start of the replica making, I was actually using needles because it made sense to me, and that's how my father taught me how to work with leather. But then I went to Switzerland, and Marquita showed me how to sew with boar bristles instead of needles, and well, it's really cool. And you can make really, really tiny holes for the stitching because when you put the thread through the needle, it's actually, the thread is there double, and you have to accommodate for the size of the needle. But with the boar bristle, you actually use the shape of the end of the thread and just elongate it, and so the hole compared to the thread can be much thinner. So lately, for the reconstructions where there's tiny holes on the original, I actually use boar bristles. On the reconstruction of the blue and printed pouch, I think I used the boar bristles, not that one, that's, yeah, it's on the other end, the one with the gold birds. And and I think the pouches from Dordrecht have also quite tiny stitching, and especially the one with the side coverings. There are still the threads, probably silk threads, in place. I was kind of, some of the archaeological leather is sewn back together by the conservation people, but here it's actually the original thread, and that's causing why you can't open it and draw it perfectly. And I'm not sure, but I don't think that you would be able to have such thin needles that would accommodate such thick thread compared to the really thin holes. So there, I think you can actually use the bristles. I was afraid, what about the textile? But if you use really thin awls, you can go through the textile without damaging them. I use the four-edged awls, reconstruction of the medieval one, which has like 15 centimeters long or 12 centimeters long blade. Also thanks to Marquita Volken, because she showed me how it should be. I tried it and it's much easier to work with. So, and even with the textile layers, you don't damage the textile. And on the other reconstruction, which the people online didn't see, on the blue pouch, that is actually hand-woven silk, hand-dyed from, yeah, I don't know if this helps anything. But if you used really thick needles on this, which would be appropriate for the leather, it would damage the material. So I think that's the way to do it. And for the London reconstruction, that was a phase where I actually used the needles still. It's easier with the needles when you apply the tabby woven edge, because you can use it to tighten the weave, but actually it's not that necessary. You can use another tool to do that. So yeah, I try to use the replicas and the bristles now, because my teacher in Switzerland forced me to do it, but I happily obliged. And it works. And with on some of the both pouches and girdle purses, there are really wide openings, wide holes, and kind of thin imprints of the threads. And there I think you can use needle and something that will be fluffy and leave only a small imprint compared to the size of the hole. But that's probably all.
Jana, can you tell me, did you find or just make attempt to find some textiles on leather? There are any traces that improve your way of your reconstruction?
Well, the pouch from Cologne, that's actually double layer of white leather. And I, in my research, I consider the white leather on the same level as the textiles, because it also doesn't survive in archaeology. But with the textile, I found, well, in the Swiss collection by Schmedding, there's, I think there's 5 pouches in the catalog. I will cite them in the article, which are lined with leather, but it's mostly white leather. I asked around on Czech conference, which also made the textile and leather people collaborate, if they ever heard of anything like that, but they didn't. But on girdle purses, there's the combination of textile and leather in 16th century is quite common. And I think the earlier examples should be also there, but it's hard to find them together. So not in archaeological context, yes, in the historical context of the Swiss well, church textile. And that's all for now, but with the pouch, the third pouch from Dordrecht, the one with the tunnel stitching, the stitching is so close and so tiny that it must have been textile, because to sew 2 layers together of leather like this wouldn't make sense. It's just no.
No, we don't. So maybe we should discuss it during the coffee break. We've got 25 minutes for coffee break, and we'll meet again for the last session at 4:40.
Yes, let me say a few words before the coffee break. We will have guests from museum, from authority at the banquet this evening at 6. Remember that the dinner is at 6, okay? Hello. Hello. You are very welcome after coffee break. And let's start with presentation, second presentation of Marquita Volken. Marquita, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let's start. Time is money.
Okay, is the presentation up? You can see it.
Yes.
Oh, see, thank you for giving me a second chance. So I would really like to say thank you to Anna for this invitation. Didn't get time to say it the first time because technologically I was challenged. And I realized I have to really up my game after the last two presentations, which were so very good. So today I would like, for the second time, to present the archaeological leather finds related to equestrian and agricultural activities from the Canton of Jura, Switzerland, and specifically the village of Saint-Ursanne. Saint-Ursanne is basically in the armpit of Switzerland. It's a very small village. Even today, there's only about 600 inhabitants. It's not really close to any large, important towns. It's close to Delamont, close to Basel, but not really anywhere important. The village and the monastery of Saint-Ursanne was established after the 7th century hermit Ursinus, who lived in a small chapel. The monastery was taken over by the secular canons in the 12th century, and a collegiate church was built. The village is stuck between a river and a mountain slope, and the only access, even today, is this bridge. The 14th century structures are well preserved, and literally nothing has changed since the 16th century. The changes that have happened are extremely recent. So here in this map of the village, the blue section is the oldest part of the village from the 13th century, and the green section is the new part made in the beginning of the 14th century from reclaimed wetland. This modernization of the village street services required a campaign of rescue archaeology excavations. The old town from 2016 to 2017, and the new town in green from 2018 to 2021. So to the north is the mountain, that's why there's nothing there, where St. Ursinus had his chapel, and the middle of the old town, which is the big empty space in the blue part, has the collegiate church and monastery. And you can see the access bridge. Oh, why did that jump? Why is that jumping ahead? So the rescue excavation followed the trenches cut for the services and proved to be very, very challenging because of the narrow trenches, the waterlogged earth, the bad weather, mostly winter, and the pressure of the construction schedule. So here you can see there, this is the actual width of the trench. And it would be dug out quickly by machine. They would rush in, do what they could, and then the machines came after them. So the waterlogged earth, though difficult for the excavation, meant that the organic material like wood, bone, and leather were well preserved, producing several thousand leather fragments from the black earth layers in the new part of the village. These layers were the results of the filling earth to reclaim the wetlands. So that's me cleaning the terrible fragments. This is what they look like. The majority of the leather, we're talking literally 85 to 90%, was offcuts of new leather, but there was also cobbler cut up fragments. All the leather fragments that showed traces of stitching were drawn using the Gaubitz notation. The animal type, thickness, and other details were also noted. Yeah, and you get a music track there too. So the registration drawings from the preliminary catalog, there were in the end over 1,000 pages of drawings of A3. This is the catalog.
So for the number of years of excavations, these were a lot of catalogs, a lot of drawings, and in the end, 350 artifacts were selected for a final catalog. The problem with the rescue excavation was that there was no time to do a proper stratigraphy, and the narrow trenches did not allow a plan of the layers. So the shoe fragments and their shoe styles were used to create a theoretical stratigraphy and chronology for the site. The first group contained 4 shoes that were in a complete state. These were probably from a flood in the late 11th century. The second group dates from the mid to late 13th century and were probably old rubbish contained in the filling earth that was moved to the new part of the village during the land reclaiming. Groups 3, 4, and 5 are contemporary with the reclaiming of the wetlands and are thus primary deposits. The group 6 represents the last part of the work in the village, contemporary with the construction of the village walls around the last quarter of the 14th century. The individual catalog numbers relating to the shoe styles could be located on the map of the new section of the village, thus providing a way to trace the chronological layers. And here is the group 6 from the late 14th century. You can see the little dots. This is where the finds came from and show that this is really the last group to have been worked on. The layers could also be dated by shoe groups, revealing the types of deposits and chronology. So they were able to make sort of columns of this colored dirt, and to which they gave a layer number. And then we can see the numbers in the little ovals are the shoe style chronology dates. So let's get to the archaeological leather finds. Though it's a small village, we had still things related to equestrian activities, which if you think for the late 13th, early 14th century, this can only be for a knighted class because peasants weren't riding horses. So we can ask why were so many of these elements of the knightly class were found in a small Swiss village. It's now thought that this must be from the secular canons who were established in Saint-Ursanne to run the collegiate church, and they were established from the 12th century on. So secular canons were often the younger, more how would you say, the less important sons of noble families, and they had no chance to inherit the title. So being a secular canon allowed them to live like nobles, but without having to go to war or cause any problems with the succession of the older brothers. So what we find are reins, spur straps, and saddle fragments. Now, spur straps are definitely linked to the noble class because that was the sign of being a knight, was having spurs. And this piece is probably a rein fragment, and it's made of thick cow leather and has iron bars riveted on. And this fragment comes from the mid-13th century layer. The iron bars were riveted on and served as a type of arming or protection for the leather, so that someone couldn't come along with a sword and slash off your reins of your horse, thus losing control. The Horseman of Bamberg, beginning part of 13th century, shows many parts of the horse equipment fitted with arming bars, the headstall, reins, breast strap, and also the spur straps. Back to the spur strap catalog entries. There were 4 larger fragments of spur straps armed with copper alloy bars. All but one of these finds came from the same context, dating from the early 14th century. And the number 224 has hollow dome appliques and comes from the late 14th century deposit, the group 6. When these were first found, the appearance, especially of this one, the archaeologists were called these dog collars because they look like fancy dog collars. So these copper alloy bars have a faceted face with the edges still being very, very sharp. The leather is quite thin, only about 1.5 millimeter thick. This example is still curved in the drawing, and it's made of much thicker leather, 2.5 millimeter thick. And as I said, these little bars are really quite sharp. So this is one of the reasons between the curve and the extremely sharp edges. This is the reason we think that this is not part of a belt, which some were also found in the same way. But the ones with belts were much more smooth, so that you wouldn't hurt yourself when you touched them. So that's how from the back you can see that these little teeny washers were used on the rivets. So they're placed very closely together, so it makes it impossible to cut the spur strap off during battle. So these arm spur straps were a real clear sign of being a knight, and to receive the spurs meant being knighted. And here we have Saint Martin receiving his spurs. And you can see they look pretty much like what we found at Saint-Ursanne. And it's exactly the same date. So a second group of leather fragments related to the knightly class are from saddles and saddle making. So the two catalog numbers 266 and 267 are the layers of leather nailed to the wood saddle tree and show that they were cut off, probably for replacement. Catalogs number 268 and 269 are from saddle making, new leather scrap, making layered saddle parts or coverings. And these were nailed to a frame to keep the layers in correct tension, then sewn, and then these excess edges cut off when the item was finished. And the very interesting fragment is number 265, up in the corner, which is 2 layers of leather that were glued to the cantle on the back part of the seat. So here you can see the glue is still holding some of the pieces together. And when we were talking about the difference between starch-based glue and a casein glue, this is the piece that talks about that. I didn't take a picture of the back, but it was very nasty. It was, yeah, like white, wet, gummy glue. So the centerpiece was covered by the border, which is the arching piece over the top. And the top section, you can see a little piece that sort of sticks up. That would have folded over the top edge of the cantle. And as far as I know, this is the only glued-on vegetable-tanned leather saddle cover from the early 14th century found in archaeology. Do feel free to prove me wrong, because, yeah, it would be nice to know. So here we can see the curved shape of the cantle, where that piece would have glued over. So you can see that the 2 little round parts of the back part of the seat matches to the leather that was found. So the group 4 shoes are also probably linked to the secular canons. Only one of the Zurich and the army shoe styles were found. Both were very large sizes and clearly unsuitable for farming work. And the third shoe, the locum, this is kind of an ordinary person's shoe, but there still weren't many found, and they were also only in large sizes. So this points to use by a male-only population. So we'll move to agricultural items, which have nothing to do with our noble canons who were living their life of luxury. So the rescue archaeology excavations at the village of Saint-Ursanne also produced these agricultural items: a horse collar, harness repair, leather mittens, and a slingshot. So in this excerpt from the Luttrell Psalter, dating from the first part of the 14th century and thus contemporary with our archaeological layers, we have a scene showing the harrowing or the raking of a field. So the man on the left has stones in a slingshot. That's why I've included it as part of agricultural tools. And he's chasing the crows away, while the man on the right is leading the horse, wearing brown mittens, which look like leather mittens. These are probably used as work gloves, The horse has a collar made of stuffed leather cushion and wood hames to which the rope traces are attached. So the invention of the horse collar increased the pulling ability and thus of a single horse, thus revolutionizing agricultural production. And it is not immediately obvious what this large piece of vegetable tanned pigskin is. Though broken, the object was made from a whole full-length pigskin, folded in half and sewn into a tube, the seam being at the smaller curved side at the far right. Running lengthwise was a thonged stitch down the middle, and the thongs are visible on what was the back side of the upper right fragment. The large folds and the curved shape showed it was a padded horse collar. Now, the difference between pigskin and wild boar, as far as the arrangement of the pores and the fact that the pores pass all the way through the skin, is not possible to determine. But I would think that this is more likely to be wild boar rather than domestic pig, because it has domestic boar has a lower fat content, therefore it is easier to vegetable tan. And strangely enough, in this area, Saint-Ursanne, plus another village more to the south, for the 13th century excavations, we did turn up a lot of pigskin or wild boar skin. So I think if you would just find a small fragment of this with the leather laces on it, you wouldn't, I mean, I certainly would not have immediately thought horse collar. But because it's still sort of basically in the shape of a horse collar and a good size, that's what put us on the idea of it. So the drawing shows the technical details. The top left fragment is shown from both the flesh and the grain side. So you can see that the thonging was fastened on the outside but passed through all the layers of the tube. So to create the curved shape, a horizontal slit was cut, and that's to your left, material removed and sewn up. And so this allowed to get a more curved, fat, fluffy shape rather than a straight tube that would have been quite difficult to form into the curve needed for the side of the horse's neck. So two patches were also found. The small one down on the left was on the grain side, stitched from the outside. But the large patch, which is over to the far right, was actually sewn to the flesh side on the inside, and probably to repair a weak point in the leather, or what doesn't show on the drawing or the photograph is the fact that it had teats, and so the teats had been sort of removed. The smaller teats left, but I think this is a larger teat that had been removed and then patched. The advantage of using wild boar or pigskin is that it is the most resistant to wear, especially rubbing type wear. And even today, very, very high quality saddles use pigskin for the seat because it lasts really well. The negative side of using pigskin is that it's very stiff and does not bend or have much flexibility. So to see how it is as part of the horse collar, so the reconstruction drawing on the right shows us the front and the back of the collar as it would have been when complete. So the thong seam makes a groove that the hames, the wood parts, would have fit in. The surviving fragments would have ended about where the hame, draught, and traces would have been. So if you look to the left, you see where the collar, the wood parts, the hames, would have had a little loop and a rope, which are the traces, and that's the part that wore out the collar. And so from above that we have the collar, from below that we don't have the collar. Yeah, so as far as I know, this is the only horse collar found in archaeology. And there is one from a fragment from the 18th century, but for the Middle Ages, this seems to be it. And like I say, prove me wrong. That would be great. I would love it. So, like I said, even if you just found a small piece with this sort of thonged lacing making the groove between the two halves of the cushion, I'm not sure anyone would really immediately go, oh, that's horse collar. So, other very difficult to identify things are these various fragments of folded and stitched leather pieces. Some are made of new leather, others of used leather. Some are made from old shoes. Some are made from, I'm not sure, some object that already existed. The only important identifying feature among all of them was the standard width. And by studying the traces of the stitches, it could be seen that these were repairs to harness straps. The repair was used to bridge a break or a weak place on a longer leather strap. And I think that the one that's sort of in the center left, catalog number 261, this may have been part of a saddle girth attachment. So it's not exactly a repair, but everything else is a repair. Sorry?
I don't know what's happened, but continue, please.
Okay, that's all right. Maybe it's spirits of the ancient saddle makers trying
Absolutely,
to
yes.
confirm. Okay, so thanks to the image from the Luttrell Psalter, we can identify this leather mitten as being used for agricultural work, as rather just than keeping your hands warm in the winter. This example from Saint-Ursanne has been cut up to recycle the calf leather for other uses, but the overall shape clearly shows a mitten. Usually leather mittens had a woolen inner mitten, so we're talking about 2 layers that really keep your hands dry and warm. So you can see that's really, we're in the same size as mittens. Oh, here, let me just talk. So the other 2 small pieces, one seems to be a hanging loop, which we can see on the reconstruction, and the other curved one seems to be a beaded joint for a thumb. I'm not 100% sure, but I can't imagine what else it would be. So we'll go on to the catalog number 270 is 1/2 of a slingshot pouch. So again, an agricultural tool, though we didn't know it. The stitches around the edges show that the pouch had 2 layers of vegetable tan leather, and the slots are made in 3 lines, and they show traces of a very thin material being woven through. And the estimated thickness of this little straps that are kind of in a dark, I've shaded them gray, that less than 0.2 millimeters thick. That's very, very thin. That's like paper thin. The other 2 objects, I couldn't cut them out of the frame. Those are part of probably a book bag. So what I thought that material could have been in the slingshot pouch was parchment or vellum rawhide, and that would have been a very, very good thing. So this is the reconstruction, and you can see that the 3 lines come together and would have made a round braid, one with the finger loop and one with the release string. And given that parchment or rawhide is very, very strong, the sort of centrifugal force used to use a slingshot to throw the stones is very, very high. So this would have been literally the toughest, most flexible material they could have used. And we had the shoe style that had absolutely the largest number of examples was this sort of Parma style with the lace that wraps around the ankle. And these I find, of course, in mostly large sizes, though there are some small baby ones. And strangely enough, that's also the boot he's wearing in the Luttrell Psalter. So we can see the relation between the leather fragments that were found in this small village and the agricultural activity that happened around it. So thank you for your attention. And I'm glad we had a presentation that had literally no mess-ups.
Thank you very much, Marquita. Let me say they are a real master of archaeological leather. I can say that we use you. So please, questions to Marquita, our specialist.
Oh, yeah, I did want to also, mention that the publication will be ready hopefully by July or August.
So quickly.
Well, no, I've been working on it for 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah, everything's gone to be laid out and printed now, so it's complete. But like I say, if someone does in the next few weeks contact me and say, oh, we have tons of 14th century horse collars, I will be very happy to stop the presses and insert that information.
Okay, Marquita, maybe I could help you with this collar, because I think that we actually have one published. It was published by Henryk Wiklak in 1956 in Archaeological News. I don't know how to translate.
Yeah. I think
it's from Gdańsk. It's
Yeah.
dated to the end of the 11th century, beginning of the 12th century. And it's described as some kind of pillow from the from the leather strap filled with hay. And
I think I know this piece.
Yeah,
it is
and
kind of
I'm
a
not
cushion.
sure. I'm not sure if it's collar, but it's published as collar, and you will find it. Probably
Yeah.
online. But I'm not so sure if this oldest.
The problem with that one is that they really don't think that padded horse collars were invented before the end of the 12th, beginning 13th century.
Yeah, that might be
So
problem
its
with
date
the dating of Gdańsk layers. It could be a little too early, and it might be changed during next archaeological investigation. But maybe it's late medieval.
Yeah, that one, if my memory serves me, that one is not so much as like a tube as it is more of like a short section of just cushion. It's like a pillow.
Yeah, I don't have this picture in front of me, so I don't remember. But I do remember that there is a Homonto collar in the title of the article. So.
Yeah. Well, see, I can't read the title. I can only remember the picture.
Okay, so.
But if my memory serves me, it was much more of a cushion, and these kinds of cushions could have been used for a number of things. Riding pillion, which did exist, so you have a little cushion that wraps around the back of the cantle of the saddle that allows the second person to sit on the horse, and that's what I had always kind of filed it under. But I'll look at it again, definitely. Thank you.
That's true. So thank you very much.
Any questions to Marquita? Yeah, please.
And I will help you with the horse saddle, because it seems that in Polish town of Wieluń in 2010 quite nice piece was found with complete wooden structure and almost complete leather covering. However, it is dated to between half of the 14th century and half of the 15th century. So yours is older, but I will try to send it to you with the help of Jana.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, and it's seriously vegetable tanned leather glued to the wood.
You will have to you will have to check this, but I think so.
Oh, well, I mean, that's any saddle, of course, is extremely interesting. And that's like the great unwritten book between Esther Cameron and Kita Mold and I is the saddles. And we've been collecting bits forever. And we're just going to be too old to ever write it. But I'll pass the collection on to somebody.
This saddle and with reconstructions is on a website, I think. Not only a book, but internet is published.
I'm not sure now. I have just a PDF on my cell phone before me. So
Marquita,
we
I
will
will check it and I will send you an email.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, this is so great. I'm just like, it's not even my birthday.
Yeah. Christmas time. Yes, would you like to add something or some remarks or not? No. So thank you very much, Marquita, that you are with us. I hope you will be tomorrow also. We will discuss much more about leather finds and leather working, so stay with us tomorrow.
Okay, the first part of the morning I have a museum visit, so I'll be late. I'll be late, but I will definitely, the moment that I'm free, I'll be back online with you.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your kind attention and all the interesting information you're going to send me.
Bye. So this is our last session for today. We finish on time. I'm very thankful for this. And we will meet at what time? At 8. Yeah, we'll have almost an hour to prepare to the banquet. 6. At 6. Not 6, of course 6.